Some things are simple. They might not look like something out of, let's say, average, yet they are kinda impressive. This is the idcooling AF-125-K, a 120mm fan coming in the most average possible box. Inside we got the fan and a bunch of screws. Nothing fancy. And the fan itself I would best describe as solid. Every choice in production was solid. The frame is well made and it doesn't feel shabby at all. We got big ass rubber corners on every edge, another solid choice. Attached to the 44cm long 4-pin PWM cable we got a daisy chain plug, we got 7 heavily bent and quite pointy wings coming out of a relatively small central hub, and the bearing is a fluid dynamic one. All solid, tried and tested choices, and other than the color, because there is also an AF-125-W white version, and other than that, you've got nothing to choose from. No ARGB, no proprietary connectors, it's just a fan. But the thing that threw me off at first were the specs. This thing is supposed to spin up to 2000 RPM while it's pushing up to 78.25 CFM at up to 2.68 mm of H2O. Now, that might not look spectacular, it's a bit high CFM for the speed, but nothing revolutionary, no. What threw me off is the noise, because for one of the first times ever, I saw a manufacturer state a decibel number with 2 digits after the comma. This might be like the very first time a manufacturer actually measured the noise, instead of just saying default 25 dBA. Yeah, for some reason there is a unnatural amount of fans out there that output, somehow, the exact same magical number of decibels. Somehow. But not this one. However, that doesn't mean that it's good, so let's see about that. First, we benchmark the AF-125-K on our K simulator, where we use 2 of them to recycle the air within a wooden box and measure the performance with the Nokia P1 in the center. And running at max, the AF-125-K managed to keep the temperature at 42.9 degrees C above ambient, which is a surprisingly high result. It's right next to other very important contestants like the EK Loop, like the Corsair LX120, Scythe Kaze Flex, all very important fans. But most importantly, looking at the big picture, it is pretty high up there, especially considering the speed. But the thing with case fans is usually just the noise, so we slowly lowered the fan speed in 10% steps and we noted down the noise and performance along the way, and surprisingly enough, it performed there too. At max, it started off roughly in between a Silent Wing Pro 4 and a Scythe Kaze Flex, of course not having as much punch on the high end compared to a Pro 4. I mean, the Pro 4 is spinning significantly faster, so there's that. But the Kaze Flex is especially interesting because both end up at the same temperature. The AF-125-K is just much quieter at doing so. And if you compare both lines, the AF-125-K is actually slightly better, or a lot, depends on how you want to interpret 2.5 dB from a meter. Anyway, until about 50% of the max speed, the AF-125-K has the upper hand, where from there on the Kaze Flex 2 takes over again. And overall, as far as case performance goes, the AF-125-K is everything but bad. Even compared to a Silent Wing Pro 4, it might not have a ratio that good at max, but once you get the RPM lower, the idcooling fan takes over for a very long time. But let's also touch some grass here. The NF-A12X25, for example, is still outperforming it if you noise normalize the fans to its max speed. So as a whole, for a case fan, it is very solid. But what about radiators? For that, we use a 80mm thick AlphaCool Monster radiator and we measure the water temperature above ambient and we see how low the fan can keep that. And at 11.8 degrees C above ambient, it's a little bit less solid, sure, but it is still right next to the Nokia NF-A12X25, which is also spinning at 2000 RPM, so it is definitely not in a bad spot. It's just not as overpowered as it was in a case scenario. The noise to performance ratio across the whole spectrum is a mix of what we can now expect based on the max performance result for radiators, mixed with the ratio we had before. It is generally still better than the Scythe Kaze Flex 2, and it is still starting off at a much worse spot than the Silent Wing Pro 4 and then taking over after just slightly lowering the fan speed. The AF-125-K just has less punch than it had before, which is the one thing that made it interesting when comparing it to the NF-A12, for example. And compared to the Arctic P12 Max, which is of course, or it has of course much more max performance, given that we are comparing it right down to the Max and not the regular one. But also generally, the P12 Max is just plain better once you normalize both fans to the same noise. Or to the same performance. It doesn't really matter which way you want to see it, but the P12 Max is just better. So where do we stand with this? Well, it is, in my opinion, a case fan, or the max throughput that can be achieved when there is little to no obstruction is just better than on a radiator. But it's not only that, because the noise is also at a nice level across the whole spectrum. Then again, it is no A12X25 once you push the numbers down low enough for cases. But overall, it is a good fan. And if you want an exact comparison, a very good comparison, it behaves roughly like a better Scythe Flex 2 on both radiators and cases. It's basically a upgraded Flex 2. Which then brings me to the reason why I was excited about these in the first place. One of these suckers will cost me 13 USD or 10 euros a pop if you buy them in a triple pack. And that makes these very interesting for the average user. Sure, an A12X25 has a better noise to performance ratio, of course it has, but 3 AF-125Ks are definitely better than a single A12, so yeah, there's that. So for me, definitely a recommendation, much better suited for case environments, if you ask me, but they are also good on rads, just not amazing. But okay, this should be everything on the idcooling AF-125K, and at this point a huge thank you to idcooling for sending them over. Oh, on a side note, we have a Discord server, so if you want to join, the link is down below. And we got channel membership, so if you are planning to sell your soul for an OG poop emoji, that's one way to go. But if not, I'm also releasing the content to all members 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Except for the NDA stuff, because, you know, I don't want to get sued. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but will also serve to compose a beautiful letter to idcooling to get a bunch of these. Because apparently these also exist in thick, and I want them. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to continue, have a look at our take on the Height-Wise 60 case. I know, completely out of topic, but I didn't know what to put here, so I hope you enjoy that one too. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.